In the morgue, a cheap necklace on the chest of a homeless man changed my whole life in one night. So how did that little photo lead me to a girl saying "Dad" to her father for the last time on the poorest street in town? You'll find out in this story. Stay with us until the end. It was dawn in the hospital. Now the hallway looks like an empty church. The white lights cast strange shadows on the wall. The air conditioning blows very cold air, and even the ticking of the clock sounds loud. Carlos Navarro, 29 years old, still wearing his gown, with deep dark circles under his eyes, covers his face with his hands. His face with his hands. The shift had been tough. The ICU was full. People were crying in the reception area. A nurse was almost fainting from exhaustion. He just wanted a hot coffee and 5 minutes to sit down before he got it. The morgue door opens with that dry hinge noise. "Doctor?" says the orderly, pushing the metal stretcher. Another one has arrived. Carlos takes a deep breath. He doesn't ask any questions. He already knows what that means at this hour. Dead. Cold. He walks over to the stretcher. The white sheet covers everything. Only the stiff, lifeless feet with their purple nails are visible. "Name?" he asks, grabbing the clipboard. The orderly shrugs. "I only know that he came from the emergency room. He arrived in bad shape. He stopped on the way. No one was with him," he says without looking up, as if he has seen this 1,000 times before. Carlos reads the hurried handwriting of another male doctor, approximately 70 years old. Cardiorespiratory arrest. No documents at the time. Later found. Name Ernesto Delgado. He repeats it in a low voice. Ernesto Delgado. The echo of his own voice in the morgue sounds strange. The name of someone from a lifetime. But now he is just a cold body on a stretcher. Does he have family? Carlos asks almost automatically. From what they said upstairs, no one came. No one called, replies the stretcher bearer. Everything is there in the file. Carlos runs his finger along the lines. Accompanying person, blank. Family contact, blank, blank. It bothers him more than he would like to admit. He signs the receipt for the body. The paper trembles just a little in his hand. A mixture of fatigue and something he doesn't know how to name. "Leave it. I'll take care of it from here," says the orderly. He just nods his head, half tired, and leaves. The door closes again, leaving the sound of silence and the air conditioning. Carlos pulls the sheet slowly, always with respect. The man's skin is thin and slightly yellow. His face is bony, his cheeks sunken, his beard unkempt, his white hair disheveled. His mouth is slightly open, as if he still wants to say something he never said. His eyes, now closed, have deep marks around them, wrinkles that are not only from age, but also from worry, from the sun on his face, from hard work and little sleep. His hands immediately catch the eye, thin hands full of calluses with old cuts, short nails, hands that used tools, brooms, hoes, hands that lived hard. The clothes are dirty, the old shirt is faded and has a tear near the edge. The pants are simple, somewhat loose with stains that no one bothered to wash. The sneakers seem bigger than the foot. The laces are frayed. Carlos swallows hard. "Don Ernesto," he murmurs in a tone that no one else hears. That's how they brought him. He looks around. No one answers. Of course, the morgue is just that cold space with white tiles. The smell of cleaning products mixed with the smell of an old hospital. A small metal table, a sink, a cabinet with gloves, gowns, instruments, and him and the man at the clipboard. He reads a piece of the admission report. He arrived confused, with difficulty breathing, suspected heart attack. He has no companion. He says he lives alone. Lives alone. That part sticks in his mind like a splinter. He adjusts the sheet, covering the body again, and stands longer than necessary, just looking at that motionless body. Outside, someone drops a tray. You hear the metallic clang, a hurried apology, a nervous laugh. In here, nothing, just the sound of his own heart, beating slower than normal. He died alone, arrived alone, will be buried alone. How he thinks aloud, but almost whispering. His tired face comes a little closer to the man's. He notices a dark spot near the temple, a healed cut on the eyebrow, small marks on the skin, as if he had been exposed to a lot of sun, a lot of rain. a lot of wind. It's the kind of body that no one would imagine was once a child who ran, who played, who laughed until he was out of breath. There, all that remains is the final part of the story, crushed into a few cold lines in the file. An elderly, poor man with no one to accompany him, no longer. He thinks with a pain that is not professional, but human. Outside, the nurse knocks lightly on the door and enters with only half her body. "Dr. Carlos, everything okay in there? Do you want me to help you with anything?" He lifts his face as if being pulled out of a long thought. "Yes, Anna. Don't worry. I'm just going to organize things here and I'll be right up." She quickly observes the scene, notices the man's body, and lowers her gaze a little. "You came alone, right?" she asks, already knowing the answer. He just nods with a quiet, weak, "Uh-huh." She lets out a sigh. How sad. She closes the door, leaving him alone with Ernesto again. Carlos puts the clipboard on the table, crosses his arms, and stands there looking at the body, as if trying to see beyond it. Who was Ernesto? Where did he live? What did he eat? What scared him? Did he have anyone? Did he laugh loudly or was he quiet? Did he like music, soccer, soap operas? None of those answers are on the paper. He feels something strange in his chest, a mixture of anger and sadness. Anger at seeing that for many, this is just another body, another poor old man, another person without a family. Sadness because that is exactly what it seems. No one called, no one asked, no one came. He slowly runs his hand over the sheet, smoothing it out, arranging it, as if that could show a minimum of respect, of care. Carlos picks up the file again and looks at the time of death. It was recent. He imagines Ernesto from a few hours ago, breathing with difficulty, perhaps asking for help in a weak voice. He imagines him trying to say something important, and no one understanding him, or no one having time to stop and listen to him. Will anyone miss him tomorrow morning? He thinks without saying it, just looking at that still face. Carlos's fingers begin to rub together restlessly. He looks at the clock on the wall. Time passes, the same for the living and the dead, but the difference is cruel. On the other side of the wall, he knows there are many people fighting to stay here one more day, and here inside with him is a man who lost that fight with no one to hold his hand. He bites the inside of his cheek, a gesture he has had since he was a teenager when something moves him inside. "No one should leave like this," he says, almost in a whisper. Carlos puts on his gloves slowly, pulling each finger carefully. The sound of the latex stretching seems even louder inside that silent morgue. He takes a deep breath. That moment is never easy. But today there is something strange in the air, something he cannot explain, but he feels it on his skin like a chill that comes for no reason. He brings the stretcher closer to the bright light, adjusts the focus, and begins to open the old man's shirt to begin the examination. The worn fabric tears a little when it comes apart at the sides. The sound is small, but it hurts his ears. And then he sees it, a strange lump near the chest, something pushing the fabric from underneath the shirt, as if it had been hidden there for a long time. He murmurs, frowning. With his fingertips, he slowly lifts the shirt. The rough fabric scrapes against the metal underneath and makes a soft sound, almost like a low tinkling under the shirt. Attached to a simple chain is a heart-shaped necklace. The metal is cheap, darkened at the edges, scratched. It doesn't look like jewelry. It looks like one of those keepsakes that no one takes off, even to sleep. "You carried this," Carlos whispers, as if talking to someone who could hear him. He takes the heart very carefully, as if it were fragile. The metal is cold, but it seems to weigh more than it should. The heart opens. It has a small, almost invisible hinge, but it works when you open it. Everything changes inside. A small photo, already yellowed at the edges, folded in one corner. A girl of about 7 years old, hugging the neck of the man, who is now there, motionless. They both smile, a smile so vivid that it hurts to see it in such a dead place. The girl's hair is tied back with 2 colorful barrettes. Her front teeth are slightly apart, that typical smile of a girl who has already lost a baby tooth. She hugs her dad tightly as if she will never let go, and he, Ernesto, smiles like someone who carries the world in his chest. Carlos feels a lump in his throat, a strange warmth rising from his stomach as if something inside him had awakened with a start. "My God," he says softly, turning the pendant over with his hands trembling just a little. On the back, written by hand in blue pen, now almost faded, are the words, "Dad, with love, Julieta." The handwriting is a girl's, the letters small, some larger than others, a pure, true scribble. Carlos feels his heart beat slower, then faster. It's as if he's been punched directly in the chest. He closes his eyes for a second, trying to calm down, but he doesn't quite succeed. When he opens them, he looks again at Ernesto, the man with marked skin, a tired face, and hands that worked until the end. That same man had a daughter who wrote "Dad" in crooked letters and gave huge smiles when she hugged him. "You weren't alone," he says, swallowing hard. He runs his thumb over the photo carefully, almost like a caress. It's strange. The body is cold. The room is cold. But the photo is warm. It seems alive, as if it holds a little piece of love inside that didn't die. Carlos adjusts the necklace in the palm of his hand and stares at the photo for a long time. He imagines the scene, a simple park, perhaps with soft sunlight touching the girl's face, Ernesto carrying his daughter in his arms, the kind of moment that no one thinks is special, but then it all comes back. He feels the air stuck in his throat because there, in that photo, is something he never had, something that always hurt, a father, a family, a real hug. And suddenly he realizes that he is talking to himself. "Who are you, Jules? Where are you now? Do you know? Do you remember that day?" The pendant moves on the chain, making a slight sound. A small sound, but enough for Carlos to feel something else he wasn't ready to feel. A pang of guilt. He doesn't know why, but he feels as if opening that necklace was more than a simple gesture, as if he had taken something sacred from Ernesto's chest. He closes the metal heart slowly, with a soft click, then places his hand on the man's chest in silence. A simple, human gesture. "If you were me, would you open this necklace? Write your comment in one sentence. I promise I'll take care of this," he says so softly that it sounds like a secret. The white light is still cold, the air is still freezing, but inside that morgue, for a moment, there is warmth. A warmth that comes from a cheap necklace, a crooked photo, a name written with a child's love, and Carlos feels, without understanding why, that that little metal heart is going to move his in a way he cannot yet imagine. Carlos. He stands still with the necklace still open in his hand, as if time had slammed on the brakes there inside the amphitheater. The cold air hits his face, but it's as if he doesn't even feel it. He looks at the photo once more. The girl hugging Ernesto's neck with a huge smile, her eyes closed from laughing so much. The old man, alive, warm, happy. Then he looks up very slowly and looks at the now motionless body on the stretcher. It's a strange shock in the photo. Too much life there in front of him, pure silence. The question comes without asking permission, first arising in his chest, and only later turning into words. If they loved him so much, why did he die alone? He doesn't say it out loud, but the phrase echoes inside him as if someone had shouted it in an empty hall. Carlos's eyes harden a little. He feels something rising in his throat, as if he were about to cry, but it doesn't come out yet. He stays there, trapped, squeezing. He looks again at the old man's face. "What happened to you, sir?" he murmurs, almost like a sigh. Where were those people in the photo? He is no longer seeing just a patient. He is seeing a father, a man who was once hugged tightly by a smiling little girl who wrote, "To my dad, with love." And then, without meaning to, he begins to see himself there, not in the body, but in the emptiness. Carlos feels an old weight awakening, a weight he has carried for as long as he can remember. Orphaned since he was a baby, he does not remember his mother's hugs. He does not remember the smell of coffee made by his father, or the laughter at a table full of people. He has no memory of birthday parties with cake and hugs. What he remembers is an iron crib in a large room, the cries of other children mixed with his own, a peeling ceiling, and a tired nun trying to take care of everyone. He remembers sleeping, looking up, imagining a face he didn't know. Maybe I look like my dad, or my mom. No one could tell him. He never had a single photo, while the other children in the orphanage sometimes received an old bar, a used toy, a crumpled photo of a distant relative. He had nothing. He was just Carlos, with no family name, no story told by anyone. He clutches the necklace tighter. That metal heart holds more than a photo. It holds proof of something he always wanted. Someone who belongs to someone. A father who has a daughter. A daughter you call my dad, with pride. And he never had anyone to call mine. Deep down inside, there is still a little Carlos, a boy of about 7 years old, sitting on an iron bed, hugging a thin pillow, looking out the orphanage window at night, wondering if somewhere, someone, was thinking of him. He swallows hard. The lump in his throat tightens. If he had that girl, he whispers, looking at the photo again. Why didn't anyone come with him? Why was there no one up there holding his hand? The question hurts, because it's not just about Ernesto, it's about him too. Will I die like that? One day on a cold stretcher with a tired doctor checking his chart and no one asking about me. He feels angry when he thinks that, and he shakes off the idea with a heavy sigh, but the feeling remains. He tries to pull himself together, adjusts his mask, takes a deep breath. The work must go on, he knows. There is protocol, there is a schedule, there is a report. He closes the clasp carefully, the click sounding louder than it should. He places the chain on Ernesto's chest, but the object seems to weigh 10 kilos in his hand. Such a simple necklace shouldn't weigh so much. He removes his hand, then puts it back. He can't move away. His eyes scan the details of the body, the marks, the bulging veins, the thin skin, and again he stops at the hands full of calluses. Dad's hands that held, a child's hands that stopped falls, that dried tears, that put food on the table without knowing how he was going to pay. Hands that no longer exist, but that once meant everything to someone. Carlos's chest tightens again. Someone loved this man. The phrase comes complete, clear. He closes his eyes and feels his eyelashes get wet, even though no tears are falling yet. Someone loved this man. It doesn't sound like just any idea. It sounds like a truth that hits him in the chest like a hammer. He opens his eyes again and holds the necklace with both hands, now as if he were afraid of dropping it. If someone loved Ernesto, why did he end up there alone, in silence, with no familiar faces nearby? Could it be that that girl knew her dad was here? Could she be in another city? Could she be sick? Could she not have enough money to come? What if that girl is the only person in the world who cares about him? What if she was all he had? What if he was all she had? What if she was his only daughter? Where is she? That question enters his mind like a nail. It stays there, firm, bothering him. He tries to concentrate on the procedure. He straightens the lamp, adjusts his gown, and brings the instrument cart closer. Instruments takes a deep breath, but it doesn't help. The hand that should be steady trembles a little. The necklace, instead of being forgotten in a corner, seems to pull at his eyes all the time. Every time he looks at Ernesto's chest, it's the faint glint of metal that catches his attention. If they loved him so much, why did he die alone? He feels that phrase hit him in the heart, as if someone were saying it to him again. And with that, another image appears in his head. He sees himself as a child sitting on the stairs of the orphanage, watching a couple arrive to meet the children, all dressed up with their hair combed, wearing slightly better clothes, each trying to get attention in their own way. One sang, another showed a drawing, another remained quiet and well-behaved. He remembers the feeling, his heart racing, the foolish hope that maybe someone would look at him and say, "It's him," but they passed him by as if he were invisible. He squeezes his eyes shut as if to erase that memory, but it doesn't work. It only makes it clearer. There, in that amphitheater, holding the collar of an old stranger, he feels again what he felt as a child, the fear of being nobodies, of belonging to no one. Only now, the fear is mixed with something else. The rage of seeing someone who was clearly once loved end up like this, abandoned, labeled, left behind in the early hours of the morning. He forces his body to move, takes a step to the side, takes a tray, returns, tries to focus on what he has to do, on the movements he already knows by heart, but it's as if the necklace were stuck to his palm, pulling his attention again and again. This isn't right. he murmurs. The silence answers him with the ticking of the clock on the wall, sounding louder every second, reminding him that time has passed for old Ernesto and continues to pass for those who are still here. Carlos's chest isn't just emotion, it's physical, a tightness, a pressure, as if someone had placed a weight right on top of his heart. He closes his eyes for a few seconds, seeking a little calm in the darkness of his closed eyes. He sees the photo of the girl with her dad again. He sees their smiles. He sees the sun on their faces. He sees the tight hug, and if she were his only daughter, where is she? When he opens his eyes, the scene is the same. White light, white tile, motionless body, heart-shaped necklace. But inside, nothing is the same anymore. He can't treat Ernesto like everyone else. He can't go on automatically like in so many other cases. There is something there that won't let him, and that something is exactly what is missing in his own story. A bond, a connection, a love that was so real that it doesn't fit on a hospital form. Carlos takes another deep breath. The air enters, but it doesn't take away the discomfort. On the contrary, it seems to make it bigger. He looks at the old man, looks at the necklace, looks at the photo, looks at the marked hands, and the anguish continues. It doesn't go away. It doesn't get smaller. Carlos leaves the morgue slowly, still holding the closed necklace in his hand, as if he were carrying something alive inside it. He doesn't realize it, but he squeezes the metal so hard that it leaves a mark from the chain on his glove. The hallway is almost empty, just a sleepy nurse filling out papers and a yawning guard near the door. With each step, it seems as if something is pulling him back, as if the old man's body is calling him, insisting without saying anything. He reaches the reception desk. The girl at the counter, her hair tied back in a crooked bun, looks at him with a face that says she already knows the answer. "Doctor, no one came, right?" He just nods his head. The movement is small, but it hurts. Nothing. No calls. He insists, even though he knows she would have warned if there had been anything. "Nothing, doctor," she says in a sad tone. Not a single question. Not a relative. Not a friend. Nothing at all. Carlos runs his hand through his tired hair. The bright light in the reception area doesn't help. It makes everything feel harder, colder. "Can I see the system?" he asks, a little surprised. But she hands him the computer. "Sure, but you've already checked everything. There's no record of an active family," he replies, already sitting down and opening the file online. She spells the name slowly, as if each letter weighed heavily. Ernesto Delgado. The system loads and loads, making that annoying noise it always makes. Then some old data appears, almost erased by time. An address, just an address. A simple house last registered years ago in a poor neighborhood in a remote area. One of those places where the bus only comes once an hour, if it comes at all. Carlos leans closer to the screen, as if that could give him more details. The system shows a very old, blurry photo, blurred. A narrow street, crooked houses, a peeling wall, a dog crossing in the background. Nothing to indicate family, nothing to indicate life, but it's the only lead the girl at the reception desk has. She looks at it from the counter, curious, and goes to find someone. "Doctor," she asks carefully, as if afraid of getting involved. Carlos takes a deep breath before answering. That man couldn't have been alone, not with this necklace. He opens his hand and shows the metal heart. He had a daughter, a little girl. Someone loved him. Someone has to know what happened. The receptionist looks at the necklace with eyes slightly filled with tears. Poor little girl. She says she must have suffered a lot. He closes the necklace again with that click that has already pierced his chest. "I have to find her," he says firmly, but his voice comes out with a lot of feeling. The girl frowns. "But it's the middle of the night, doctor." "I know," he replies, getting up from his chair, "but if I don't go now, I won't be able to sleep." He leaves the reception area with quick, almost hurried steps. He can't think of anything else. He can't imagine starting the autopsy while that question keeps running through his head. If he had a daughter, where is she? The parking lot is frozen. The wind hits his face and blows his coat open. He opens the car, throws the board aside, and sits down behind the wheel. Before starting the engine, he grabs the necklace again, there inside the car. He talks to himself softly. "Help me find her, Ernesto." Just that. He starts the engine. The city at dawn is something else. Empty streets, traffic lights flashing yellow, long shadows from the trees, sleeping buildings, and a moon that seems to follow him through the window. On every block, he looks at the necklace he left on the seat. It seems that the charm also looks at the road. The direction takes him out of the center, down dark avenues, down streets that become narrower through neighborhoods that look simpler, older, more forgotten. After about 20 minutes, he enters an area of narrow streets with broken streetlights and houses stuck together. Some windows with blankets hanging, others with a dim blue light from a television, others pure darkness. Carlos slows down, checks the street number written in pen on the paper from the system. You can't trust it much. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it doesn't even exist anymore. But he follows a tire that falls into a pothole and almost knocks the collar off the seat. He catches it in the air. "Calm down, buddy," he murmurs, adjusting it. The GPS warns that he is about to reach his destination on the right, but it doesn't look like a destination. It looks like pure abandonment. And then he sees it, a very narrow street, 2 houses with peeling paint and a crooked gate, exactly like in the old photo. He stops the car, turns it off. The silence of the street is so great that he can hear a dog breathing in the distance. A motorcycle passes slowly, without haste. An old radio plays a romantic song in someone's house. The rest is pure wind. Carlos grabs the collar, opens the door, and gets out. The ground is dirt mixed with broken cement. He walks slowly down the little street, feeling the heavy air, as if this place held many stories and wouldn't let any of them out. The house numbers are written by hand, each one different. He looks for 1, 2, 3 until he stops. The number matches. Ernesto's house, or the house of someone who must have loved Ernesto. The house where that smiling girl may have lived one day. He stands in front of the door for a few seconds, trying to understand what he is feeling. It is a mixture of nerves, sadness, hope, and fear. But he takes a deep breath and knocks on the door. A light knock at first, then another. No one answers. He knocks again, louder, and listens his ear to the wood. Silence. Carlos runs his hand over his face. The wind blows colder now. He looks at the charm in his hand, the photo, the girl's smile. It can't be. Someone has to be here, he whispers. He approaches the window next to the door. The glass is opaque, but he can see a dim light inside, as if it were a candle or a very old light bulb. He returns to the door and knocks harder this time, saying, "Hello, is anyone there? I need to talk to you. It's about Ernesto Delgado." He barely says the name. Something sounds inside the house. A quick step, perhaps a chair being dragged, perhaps someone holding their breath. Carlos takes a step back, his heart racing. The doorknob turns, and the door begins to open very slowly, with a creak that sounds like a knot unraveling in his chest. Inside the house, someone heard the name Ernesto. The door creaks slowly, as if afraid to open too wide. The dim light inside the house leaves the woman's figure almost in shadow. But when she lifts her face, Carlos sees everything at once. Sunken, tired, swollen eyes like someone carrying an old sadness. Hair tied back hastily. Simple clothes stained with flour. It looks like she just got off work or came back from a bad day. "Good evening," says Carlos in a respectful, low voice without taking a step forward. The woman presses the door against her body, as if she needs to hold on to it to keep from falling. She looks at his robe, looks at the necklace in his hand, and her world seems to stop right there, right then. "You, Julieta?" he asks. The woman swallows hard. The name hits her as if someone had set her skin on fire. "It's me," she replies, almost in a whisper. Carlos feels his chest tighten. He holds the necklace firmly, not showing it yet. "I came for her father, Mr. Ernesto," just said Ernesto, and she closes her eyes at the same moment, as if someone had squeezed an open wound. Now she grabs the door with both hands. Her breathing fails. "He died," she asks, breathless, without strength, without being ready. The phrase comes out so weak that it seems to break in half. Carlos feels the ground slipping away beneath his feet. He never liked giving bad news, but this weighs differently. "Unfortunately, yes," he says simply. sincerely. The woman puts her hand to her mouth. No tears come yet, but the crying is there, rising, choking her voice. She shakes her head slowly, looking at the floor. I knew it. I knew it was going to happen, she murmurs in a hoarse voice, almost like a little girl. She opens the door completely, as if she needs air, and Carlos sees the simple house, an old table, 2 crooked chairs, a pot on the stove, the smell of empanada dough, peeling walls. Nothing missing, just a difficult life. She takes a step back and leans against the wall, seeking support. He came to talk about me, he asks, as if that were his last hope. Carlos takes a deep breath, but still doesn't show her the photo. Something tells him that now is not the time. First, she needs to talk, to get what's stuck inside her out. She breathes shakily and runs her hands over her face. I found out that they took him to the hospital, she says with shame as she looks at him. A neighbor. She saw the ambulance and said he was in bad shape, very bad shape. Carlos listens in silence, feeling that if he speaks now, he will break something. Charles continues, but her voice breaks. She didn't have money for the truck, or to buy medicine, or for anything. Tears begin to fall, one by one, slowly. I thought about going anyway, but damn, doctor. What was I going to do there? She squeezes her arms with her hands, hugging herself as if she wanted to hide inside herself. I was going to arrive and say hello. I'm your daughter, but I can't even pay for your coffin if you die. She lets out a short, broken laugh that is not funny at all. I'm dying of shame, doctor. I'm too poor. Poor in a way that hurts. Carlos feels a blow to his chest. He sees her there, so small, so shriveled, and the injustice of it burns inside him. She tries to dry her tears, but more fall in their place. I stood at the door of the house with my hand on the knob, she says, staring into space, but my feet didn't move. I didn't go. I couldn't. I stood there like a coward. She squeezes her eyes shut tightly, as if she wants to stop the crying, but her voice trembles even more. I let my dad die alone, doctor. Alone, she says, covering her mouth with her hand to stifle her sobs. Carlos feels his stomach turn. He, who always tries to be strong, feels his face getting hot. He imagines Ernesto on the stretcher, then imagines that woman here trying to collect coins to go see him. He imagines the guilt eating her up inside, devouring her, hurting her. He takes a step forward, very slowly, without invading her space. Listen, he says softly. Don't talk like that. She shakes her head. It's true, doctor, she insists, her shoulders trembling. It's true. I'm poor. I had no way to go. I had no way to help. I failed him. But if I didn't go, someone else would have to bury him. Carlos swallows hard. His throat closes up. You didn't fail, he says, but his voice comes out low, almost a whisper. Life failed them. Julieta covers her face with her hands and cries. She cries in a way that isn't pretty, isn't calm, isn't silent. It's a raw cry of someone carrying old guilt, hunger, exhaustion, fear, and love, all mixed together. Carlos feels his eyes burning. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to comfort someone who believes she doesn't deserve comfort. And for a moment, he feels something he has never felt so strongly before. Uselessness. The respected, qualified doctor couldn't prevent the death of her father. He couldn't get her to the hospital. He couldn't do anything to ease her pain. He takes a deep breath to keep his voice steady. I'm here, he says slowly, because no one deserves to cry alone for someone they loved. She raises her red, swollen eyes, almost asking for forgiveness that even she cannot give herself, and Carlos feels in his chest that from that moment on, nothing in him will ever be the same. Julieta takes a deep breath, trying to calm down, but she is still trembling. She gestures with her hand, as if inviting Carlos in. He hesitates for a second out of respect, but enters. The house is small and dark, but cozy. In its simple way, it smells of fried dough, flour, and a difficult life. In the corner is an old stove, and on the table is a cloth spread out with empanadas drying. Everything is very humble. Everything is filled with silence. She runs her hand through her hair nervously. Sorry for the mess. I'm always rushing around, she says, her voice breaking. I work late. Carlos shakes his head. You don't have to apologize, he replies. I just want to understand, that's all. She closes her eyes, takes a deep breath, and goes to a small, worn wooden cupboard. She opens it slowly. Inside, hidden behind old pots, is a cardboard box, crushed on the sides, and tied with a red ribbon that is almost faded. Julieta holds the box with both hands, as if it were too fragile for any sudden movement. It's all I have of my dad, she says in a low voice. Everything, really, everything. She puts the box on the table. She sits down. Carlos also sits down, slowly, without taking his eyes off her, with a calmness that hurts. Julieta unties the ribbon. The box opens. The smell of old paper stored for years fills the air. He kept this as if it were gold, she says, rummaging inside. The first things she takes out are folded letters, some stained, others with torn pieces. She hands one to Carlos with trembling hands. He wrote to me, she explains. When I was a little girl, I lived with my grandmother, and he worked far away. He worked a lot. He never came, but he always sent letters. Carlos slowly opens a letter. The handwriting is crooked and shaky, like someone who didn't study much. My little girl, Daddy loves you very much. The letter is cut in half, as if Ernesto had stopped to hold back his tears. Julieta runs her finger over the letter as if caressing a memory. He worked at everything. Doctor, she says with sad pride. Bricklayer's assistant. He collected cans. Anything to send me money. He was always tired. Too tired. But he always said the same thing when he could come to see me. Daughter, you are my pride and joy. Her voice breaks at the end. Then she takes out a drawing of a girl made with colored pencils. A crooked little house, a huge sun, and two people holding hands. A little girl and a thin man smiling. I did this when I was 6 years old, he says, laughing sadly. He kept it. I didn't even remember this drawing. Carlos looks at the drawing carefully. The colors are faint, but the joy is strong. He feels a knot in his stomach. He loved you, Carlos says without realizing he's already saying it. Julieta looks down. He loved me, but I didn't give him what he deserved. Hey, Carlos murmurs. You did give him what you had. Sometimes that's all what one can give. She doesn't answer. She just takes the last object from the box, the original photo, the same one that was inside the necklace. And there, in her hands, the photo seems even more alive. She hands the photo to Carlos. That day, she says with a sad smile, was the only happy day I remember clearly. The photo shows the two of them in a park, trees in the background, the sun shining on their faces. The little girl Julieta hugs her dad tightly, laughing with all her heart. He is younger, stronger, and looks at the camera with a pride that almost bursts out of the photo. We didn't have money for anything, she continues, but that day he saved up coins for weeks to take me to the park and buy me an ice cream, just one, shared between the two of us. She laughs softly, wiping away a tear. I remember him saying, "Today, my girl eats ice cream." Her voice breaks completely. Carlos holds the photo for a few seconds. It weighs almost as much as the necklace. He looks at the image. Look at that simple, amorous, sincere smile, full of love. A smile that no one would have if they didn't have a wealth that doesn't fit in their pocket. Carlos takes a deep breath, trying to understand what he's feeling, but he can't. Something inside him breaks. Something opens up. Something hurts and comforts at the same time. He looks at Julieta and, with the most sincere voice he has ever used in his life, says, "He was poor. It's true." Carlos takes a deep breath, and his voice becomes firmer. But he was a millionaire, in what really matters. Julieta looks up in surprise, her eyes still wet. I loved you more than anything. She puts her hand to her chest. You had what many people with a lot of money never get to have. True love, love that never ends, love that stays. Julieta cries, not a cry of despair like before, but a different cry. A cry that relieves, that cleanses, that brings back light. He did love me, didn't he? She asks in a very low voice, like a little girl. Carlos holds the photo tenderly and gives it back to her. He loved you very much. The smile he has in this photo. He points to it. This is worth more than any fortune, and it was only yours. She presses the photo to her chest, trembling, but in a good way, the way someone who, even in pain, finds a little bit of peace. And there, in that simple kitchen, with a box of memories on the table, the truth that was hidden behind the smile laugh in the photo, she finally finds a place to breathe. Carlos remains silent for a few seconds after seeing the photo pressed against Julieta's chest. The atmosphere in the house is heavy, but at the same time, there is something there that seems sacred, a love that hurts. He takes a deep breath, runs his hand over his face, and looks at her carefully. Julieta says slowly, "I'm on duty today. Your dad is still there at the hospital in the morgue." She remains frozen there. She asks fearfully, "Yes?" He confirms, "And I wanted to take you to him, to do something honorable, something that would make him proud. He doesn't deserve to leave as if he were nobody." She lowers her eyes, her fingers clutching the edge of the photo. "Doctor, I don't even have money for the truck," she says, ashamed. He shakes his head. "I'm not talking about the truck. I'm talking about taking you with me. I'll give you a ride. We'll leave right now, and then I'll bring you back." He pauses. "You shouldn't leave without saying goodbye." She swallows. Fear and desire fight inside her. "I'm afraid to see him like this," she confesses in a low voice. Carlos loosens his tie, as if that would lift a weight off his chest. "You've felt fear your whole life, right?" he says with a sad smile. "But regret is much worse, believe me." Her eyes fill with tears again. She looks at the box, the letters, the photo, then looks at him. "Are you sure this won't bother you?" "What bothers me is leaving you alone again," he replies directly, sincerely. "And I don't want to be just another person who turns their back on you." Julieta takes a deep breath, wipes her tears with the back of her hand, and nods slightly. "Then I'll go," she says, almost in a whisper. She puts the letters back in the box, arranging them lovingly as if she were arranging a heart. She takes the original photo and, with trembling hands, opens a small drawer next to the stove. From there, she takes out the same heart-shaped necklace with the slightly broken clasp. Carlos opens his eyes in surprise. It's the same necklace that was on Ernesto's chest. "He wore his every day," she says, showing it to him. "I kept this one. It's the same. It was the only fine gift he ever gave me in my life." She opens the locket. Inside is the same photo, but cropped differently this time. She is alone in the photo, with a small arrow drawn on it, and the words, "My life," written by Ernesto. Carlos feels his chest tighten again. Julieta puts on the necklace and closes it slowly, as if she were gathering her courage. "Let's go before I change my mind," she murmurs. They go outside. The street is still dark and silent, with the smell of night and rain that never comes. Carlos opens the car door for her. She gets in slowly, as if entering an unfamiliar place. He turns around, sits in the driver's seat, starts the engine, and the dashboard lights up. The radio almost starts to play, but he turns it off immediately. There is no room for music there. For a few seconds, no one says anything. The car starts to move. The world outside passes slowly by the window, blinking streetlights. A dog looking for trash. A woman closing her gate. A bar almost lowering its curtains while inside the silence weighs heavily as Julieta grabs the necklace with her strong hand, as if it were her father's hand, squeezing the pendant so hard that her fingers turn white. "If you're with us on this journey, let's turn up the lights a little with a like." Her fingers squeeze the pendant so hard that they turn white. Carlos notices, glances at her, and then looks back ahead. He wants to say something, anything, an "I'm sorry," an "everything will be okay," an "I'm here," but nothing seems enough. Everything sounds empty in his head, so he decides to stay silent too. They both ride together in silence, but the car is far from empty. The air is full of thoughts in Julieta's head. Scenes flash by. Her father arriving sweaty with a bag of bread in his hand, his broken flip-flops hitting the floor. His laughter when she ran to show him a crooked drawing as a child. Then the last time she saw him healthy. Then the day she found out he was hospitalized and it wasn't her fault. She bites her lip and tightens her grip on the necklace. "Forgive me, Dad," she thinks silently in the driver's seat. Carlos is also far away, returning to his childhood in the orphanage, to that row of beds. To the nights he stayed awake, wondering if somewhere in the world his dad or mom were also in a hospital alone. He imagines for a moment what it would be like if someone had come and told him, "I found your dad. Do you want to say goodbye?" No one came. No one found him. No one came. Maybe that's why he's there now, driving in the middle of the night through an almost empty city, taking his poor daughter to say goodbye to her poor father, as if somehow he were trying to fix something he could never fix in his own story. The noise of the engine is the only sound. The turn signal lights illuminate Giulietta's face at times, showing tears that continue to flow, even though she is not crying. She opens her mouth once as if to speak, but the saw starts up again. They share the same silence, the same emptiness, the same fear of losing forever, something that already hurts so much. After a while, Carlos breaks the silence, but without looking at Giulietta. She lifts her face, wiping her nose with her hand. "I can't change what happened there in the hospital," Tom says slowly, "but I promise you." He squeezes the steering wheel. I promise that at least his farewell will be dignified. You're going to do something that will make him proud of you." He pauses. "You agree to stay by his side until the end." Her eyes fill up again. "I should have been by his side the whole time," she says guiltily. "But now I'm not going to leave, even if my heart jumps out of my mouth." Carlos nods, unable to hide his emotion. "Then let's go all the way," he replies. From there on, they don't speak anymore. There's no need to say anything else. What needed to be said has already been said. The rest is just feeling. The car enters the avenue that leads to the hospital. As the hospital lights approach, subscribe if you want to follow these stories. Turn on the bell, too. The white lights of the building appear in the distance like a giant ship in the middle of the darkness. Giulietta swallows hard. Her hands sweat. She wipes them on her pants but grabs the necklace again, as if by holding that metal heart, she could hold on to her dad a little longer. The car stops. Carlos turns off the engine, takes a deep breath, and looks at her. "If you want, we can go back," he offers, giving her one last chance to back out. She shakes her head firmly, though it is filled with tears. "I'm not backing out, doctor. I ran away once. I'm not going to run away again." He feels proud of her, even though he doesn't say so. They get out of the car and enter the hospital. The atmosphere changes suddenly. The smell of medicine and strong cleaning products. Quick footsteps. People talking quietly. But all that is far away on the way to the morgue is another world. The hallway is cold and narrow, with lights that are too white. Each step echoes on the floor as if it weighed more. Giulietta walks slowly, almost stumbling from nerves. Sometimes she closes her eyes for a second, breathes, and continues. Carlos walks beside her. He doesn't touch her, but his presence is a silent support. When they reach the door of the morgue, he stops. "Are you ready?" he asks. She lets out a pained, humorless laugh. "Jose," she says but I'll never be ready, so let's go." He understands and nods, putting his hand on the cold metal handle and pushing it open. The same cold, the same light, the same strong smell of cleanliness mixed with something no one wants to name. There is a worker arranging papers and another moving a stretcher. Carlos just nods his chin. "Give us a minute, please," he asks respectfully. They both understand immediately. They know that look. They leave without saying anything. The door closes almost completely, leaving the three of them there. Him, her, and Ernesto's body. The stretcher is covered with a white sheet up to the chest. Carlos steps forward a little, as if to protect Giulietta, but she takes a step forward, her legs trembling, her hands too. "He is there?" he asks, even though he already knows the answer. "Yes," he still answers. "Carlos," in a low voice. "If you want, I'll pull the sheet down, slowly." "Yes," she nods, biting her lip to hold back the tears. "Yes." He takes a deep breath, takes the corner of the sheet, and with all the care in the world, reveals Ernesto's face. Time stands still. Giulietta stops breathing. The world disappears. The face is the same as in the photo, only without the smile, without the warmth, without the light in the eyes. She takes a step forward as if she were going to fall, but manages to steady herself. She slowly reaches out her hand. At first she is afraid to touch him, then she touches his cold forehead softly. "Sa papa," she whispers with a broken voice. "It's me, your Giulietta." The word dad comes out loaded with years of hunger, of waiting, of sadness, of guilt. Carlos takes a step back without thinking. That moment is not his, it is theirs. Julieta runs her hand over her father's face, touching the wrinkles as if trying to wake him up. "Forgive me, Dad," she cries, unable to stop. "Forgive me. I tried. I swear I tried." Tears fall on the old man's chest, wetting a small part of the sheet. I didn't go to see you in the hospital." She continues to sob. "I didn't go because I'm poor, Dad. Because I didn't have money for anything. Not for the bus. Not for medicine. Not for the coffin. I was dying of shame. I was afraid you would see me and see pure failure." She rests her forehead on his, as if she wants to bring a little bit of herself with him. "But I love you," she repeats over and over. "I love you. I love you. I always loved you. You were everything I had. You were my dad, my mom, my friend, everything." Carlos watches from afar with a heavy heart, each of her words hitting him like a blow, because somehow he knows what it's like to shout "Dad" into a void that doesn't answer. He leans against the wall, crosses his arms, but he doesn't look like a doctor. He looks like a man trying not to cry. Julieta holds Ernesto's face with both hands. "I know you did what you could," she says through her tears. "I know you worked until you were exhausted. I know you went hungry so that I could eat. I know, Dad. I know. Forgive me for not being there on your last day, but let me stay here now for a little while," as if I had arrived in time. Her sobs fill the room, each one coming out like a stifled cry. Carlos feels his eyes burning. He can no longer just watch. He approaches slowly, speaking softly and carefully. "I'll leave you alone," he says, turning to leave. "Stay as long as you need. No one will rush you." She just nods, unable to see him. He signals for no one to enter and stays outside the door, close to it, but so close that it's as if he were inside. From the hallway, he hears their murmurs, their broken words, their "I'm sorry," her daddy, her "I love yous." Every time the crying rises, it's as if someone were squeezing his chest with their hand. He closes his eyes and unintentionally lets a tear fall, because at that moment, looking through the crack in the door, watching a poor daughter say goodbye to her poor dad, Carlos feels that he is not only seeing Julieta's pain, he is also seeing his own pain, and he sees every tear that falls on Ernesto's face, as if they were the tears he could never let fall on any father's face. The funeral had been simple: red earth, a few small wreaths, half a dozen people who didn't even know who Ernesto had been, people from the neighborhood, the neighbor next door, that man who always said hello at the little store. No expensive coffin, no music, no beautiful speech. But even though it was simple, there was something different there. No one let him be buried as an unclaimed body. He had a name, he had a history, he had a daughter, and now you had someone who paid for everything in silence, without saying a word. When the last shovel of dirt fell, the gravedigger placed the wooden cross with the crooked name Ernesto. The lettering was a little shaky, but firm enough to say he existed. Julieta stood there looking at that cross as if it were her father's face. Her eyes were dry, not because the pain was gone, but because there were no more had any tears left. She had cried so much inside and out that now all that remained was a deep exhaustion. The sky was cloudy, the wind blew softly, moving her hair and Carlos's robe. The smell was of wet earth and cheap flowers, the kind you buy in a hurry, just so the hole isn't empty. People left, little by little. A neighbor gave her an awkward pat on the shoulder. "Come on, girl, he was good people," he said, not knowing what else to say. A woman passed by, crossing herself and murmuring a prayer. Another just bowed his head and left. Soon only the gravedigger remained, putting away his tools. Julieta and Carlos stood nearby, not knowing whether to approach or give him space. She stared at the mound of earth, as if she expected her father to get up, laugh, and say, "Just kidding, honey. I'm here." It didn't happen. Carlos looked at her sideways, saw her small shoulder, her hand clutching the necklace on her chest, her lips bitten to keep them from trembling. Inside him, he felt a great need to say something, but everything seemed insignificant in front of that hole in front of them, and the hole inside her. He took a deep breath. "We can leave whenever you want," he said softly. It took her a few seconds to respond. Only then did she turn her face slightly, without removing her hand from her chest. "Can I stay just a little longer?" he asked. She nodded her head. "As long as you need," she said. They stayed there a few more minutes in total silence. Only the distant sound of a shovel and a bird, until Giulietta sighed deeply, as if she were about to break down. "Said if I stay any longer, I'll never leave here," she said in a hoarse voice. She took a step back, then another, and looked at the cross for the last time that day. "Goodbye, Dad," she whispered. "Rest in peace, please." They walked side by side toward the cemetery exit, their steps slow, the ground uneven, their shoes sinking a little into the loose earth. When they reached the gate, Carlos nodded toward the parking lot. "My car is there. I'll take you home." She just nodded. She was on autopilot, walking because he was walking, stopping when he stopped. In the car again, silence. But now it was a different silence than the way there. Before, it had been fear. Now it was a mixture of exhaustion and a void she didn't yet know how to fill. She stared out the window, her eyes lost, watching everything go by without really seeing anything. The trees, the trucks, the signs, everything blurred. Carlos, at the wheel, also looked ahead, but his mind was far away. He thought about the price of the coffin, the payment he had made without hesitation, the way the woman at the funeral home had looked at him that morning. "Are you sure you want to cover the costs?" she asked. "Yes," he replied firmly, without explanation. Now, driving back, the funeral home's question sounded different inside him. He was sure, yes, but why did he feel that why growing? He knew that at some point someone was going to ask, and that moment came faster than he expected when the car turned onto the simple street where Giulietta lived. He slowed down, pulled over slowly, turned off the engine. The silence inside the car grew louder without the noise of the engine. She stayed for a few seconds without moving, without opening the door. She looked ahead, took a deep breath, tightened her necklace again, then slowly turned her face toward him. Her eyes were still red, but now there was a kind of clarity in them. "Doctor," she said softly. He replied, turning to look at her. She swallowed as if the words weighed too heavily. "Why did you do this?" she finally asked. Voice came out simple, but with many things behind it. She blinked several times, trying to hold back the tears that wanted to come back. "You paid for the coffin. The funeral was with me at the mortuary. He brought me. He took me." She continued to squeeze her fingers together. "You don't even know me, and you didn't know my dad well. Why?" The question hung in the air, as if the whole car was waiting for the answer. Carlos felt his chest tighten. He knew that question wasn't just out of curiosity. It was deeper, almost like, "Why did you see us if no one ever sees us?" He looked ahead for a second, as if searching for words on the windshield, then turned his face back to her. His eyes were also a little moist, but he didn't even try to hide it. Giulietta began, slowly. "I did it because I would give everything, truly everything, to have someone who saw me the way you saw your dad today." She opened her eyes a little, surprised. He continued with his voice breaking unintentionally. "I never had that. I never had a dad to bury. I never had someone to call dad and hold his hand when saying goodbye. I never had a cross with a name that was my blood. Nothing." He smiled sadly when I saw you hugging that body, asking him for forgiveness, calling him dad, telling him you loved him. I thought, that's what I would have given everything to experience, even if it was only for one day. She looked at him in shock. For the first time, she saw him not only as the doctor, but also as a wounded man. She took a deep breath, and her voice came out even more sincere. "And I'm sure, absolutely sure, that he did everything for you, even though he was tired, even though he was poor, even though he had nothing. I saw it in the letters, in the photo, in the necklace. I saw it in how you cried over him. Everyone may think he had nothing, but I saw a rich man, rich in the only thing that matters here." She touched his chest, and I couldn't let a man like that lie in a corner, not after everything I felt there. Giulietta's eyes immediately filled with tears, and a big, heavy tear slowly rolled down her cheek. "You did this for him, and also for yourself?" she asked in a whisper. He gave one of those half smiles that hurt more than they bring joy. "I think I did it For all three of us, he said bluntly. For him, who deserved respect. For you, who deserved to say goodbye. And for that child in here, he touched his chest softly, who always dreamed of seeing a father loved as you love yours. She put her hand to her mouth, moved. This time her tears were not only of sadness, there was recognition there, gratitude, something new. Thank you, she managed to say through her tears. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. No one had ever done anything like this for me and my dad. Never. Carlos shook his head, as if it were no big deal. Don't thank me, he replied softly. If anyone gave me anything today, it was you two. Julieta frowned in confusion. We gave you what? He looked her in the eyes. You showed me how someone can look at another person with so much love, even though it hurts so much. He said that's priceless. She looked away, trying to control herself, but the tears flowed more freely. She opened the car door carefully, still clutching the necklace. Before getting out, she looked back at him. The doctor called him. Yes, yes. If one day you feel very lonely, she said in a trembling voice, remember that today you weren't just my dad's doctor. You were part of our family. Yes, he swallowed. That touched a place inside him that no one had ever touched before. He could only respond with a nod and a whisper. Julieta got out of the car and walked slowly to her front door. Before going in, she turned to look at the parked car for a second. He thought she was going to say something, but she just touched the necklace as if making a silent promise and went inside. Carlos stayed there alone in the car, his hands on the steering wheel, his chest full of things that were difficult to sort out. But one thing was clear to him. Her question, why did you do this? It not only changed the way he saw that funeral, it changed the way he saw himself as well. In the days following the funeral, life did not return to normal for either of them. It was impossible. Something had shifted inside both of them, and nothing fit together as it had before. Julieta went back to work, but not in the same way. The empanadas continued to come out of the oven, but her hands trembled a little when she folded the dough. Sometimes, without realizing it, she would talk to herself, saying "Dad," very quietly, as if her father were sitting there in the empty chair in the kitchen. Carlos, on the other hand, tried to immerse himself in the routine of the hospital, but it didn't work. The sound of the monitors, the smell of cleaning products, the weight of the shifts, everything seemed small compared to the image of her holding her father's face and saying "Dad," between sobs. He carried his work on his shoulders, but also another weight on his chest. 2 days after the funeral, when his shift ended, he found himself standing in front of the same street where he had gone to look for her that early morning. He hadn't planned to go, he just went. He was carrying a small bouquet of white flowers, the simplest ones he could find near the hospital, and a bag of fresh bread. He didn't even know if he should do it, if it was okay, but he felt he had to do something. When he knocked on the door, his heart knocked along with it. The door opened. Julieta appeared wearing an apron stained with flour and her hair tied back with a pencil. The tired expression left her face for a second when she saw him there. "Doctor," she asked in surprise, "what are you doing here?" Carlos raised his hand with the flowers, feeling a little nervous. "I brought this," he said, almost stuttering. "I thought, I don't know, maybe it could make your week a little less heavy." She looked at the flowers with sweet surprise, as if she had never been given anything like that before. "You didn't have to?" she murmured, but a shy smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "But thank you." He also gave her the bag of bread. "I stopped by the bakery. I thought of you. You looked tired." Then he added quickly, "I don't mean you look tired. I mean yes, but in a nice way. Or, I mean, you know what I mean." Julieta let out a small laugh, the first since her father's death. "I understand, doctor," she said, shaking her head. He stood in the doorway waiting for her to say "come in" or "good evening," but she stood there holding the flowers as if she didn't want him to leave. "Do you want to come in for a little while?" she finally asked, opening the door a little wider. He entered. The smell of dough and fried onions filled the air. She put the flowers in a glass of water because she didn't have a vase. He put the bag of bread on the table and stood there, not knowing whether to sit down, or remain standing. Julieta noticed his hesitation and pointed to the chair. "Sit down. You look tired." He smiled wryly. "I'm always tired, doctor." right?" she said, adjusting his chair. "Yes," he replied, taking a deep breath. "But lately, it's a different kind of tiredness. A strange one." She watched him for a few seconds. His eyes had that quiet look that sees more than words can say. "Why did you come, doctor?" she asked directly but without harshness. He swallowed. "The truth came out before the filter because I didn't want you to spend these days alone." She opened her eyes, surprised, and also because he added, "I missed you. I wanted to know how you were." Giulietta looked down, touching the necklace around her neck. "I'm doing okay," she said sincerely. "One day is sad, another is worse, but I'm doing okay." Carlos made a thoughtful, "I'm doing okay too," he replied. From that day on, she looked up. "My dad's death hit you that hard?" "His death and his life," Carlos corrected calmly. "And you, Julieta?" She said nothing. It wasn't a cheap compliment. It wasn't flirting. It was the truth, just as she was. She looked away at the flowers. The silence that followed wasn't bad. It was peaceful. It was a silence filled with something they still didn't know how to name. In the days that followed, he came back more times. Sometimes just to leave warm bread. Sometimes to ask how she was. Sometimes to listen to her talk about her dad. And sometimes just to be there, without saying anything. On his third visit, he arrived with a small vase with a yellow flower to bring a little light into the house, she said. She smiled so sincerely that he felt something strange in his chest, something beautiful. On his fourth visit, he listened to her vent about overdue bills, sleepless nights, and the fear of not being able to go on without her father. He listened. He just listened, and that silence heard more than 1,000 pieces of advice. On the fifth visit, he brought bread again. "Do you really like bread that much?" she joked. He smiled. "But I like to see you smile when I bring it to you." She blushed and lowered her head. He smiled, half lost, half feeling that it was too beautiful. And there he sat in her kitchen chair, with the smell of empanadas and the radio playing softly. She raised her head and asked, "Doctor, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied. She played with her necklace nervously. You don't have anyone." The silence that followed hurt them both. He took a deep breath before answering. "No," he said sincerely. "I only had medicine." He paused. "Now I'm not so sure." She looked up slowly, and the two of them stood there looking at each other as if, without realizing it, something had begun to grow between them. Slowly, silently, but truly. And it was in that simple kitchen, in that beautiful silence, that the first tiny seed, shy but full of life. A week later, the sun hadn't even risen properly when Carlos parked his car in front of Giulietta's house. The street was quiet, with that early morning silence that seems to demand calm. He stood there for a moment looking at the simple door, feeling that silly nervousness in his stomach that he didn't understand, but that always appeared every time he approached her. He knocked softly on the door. 2 seconds, and she opened it. Giulietta had her hair pulled back haphazardly. Her apron was dirty with flour, and she smelled of fresh food, but even so, there was something different about her. Her eyes looked less tired, as if the early morning had not weighed as heavily on her as on other days. "Good morning," he said, somewhat shyly, running his hand through his hair. She smiled a small but genuine smile. "Good morning, doctor. I came to see how you are," he explained, although he knew that she already understood what was going on. "I just made empanadas." The smell that came from the kitchen almost knocked him over. It was a warm, welcoming smell, half sweet, half salty. It smelled like home, something he had never had. "Empanadas?" he asked, almost laughing. "At this hour?" She shrugged. "I wake up early. I like to get my hands dirty." Then she grabbed a small plate and put a freshly made empanada on it. The steam rose into the air. "Here, try it." Carlos took the plate carefully, as if he were holding something very valuable, and perhaps it was. He took a bite. The crispy dough made a soft sound. The hot filling filled his mouth with flavor. He closed his eyes for a second, as if he needed to store that moment in a safe place in his memory. When he opened them, he was smiling a sincere, easy, clean smile, the kind he hadn't smiled in many years. "My God," he said, laughing with his mouth full. "It's the best thing I've eaten in months." Giulietta laughed a light, rich laugh that seemed to open windows in her soul. "So you eat very badly," she teased him, tapping his arm with her fingertips. "It's not that," he replied, still smiling. "It's just that this tastes like, I don't know, care, you know?" He became shy when he realized what he had said, but it was too late. She looked down, embarrassed, but smiled a smile so beautiful that for a moment it erased all the pain of the last few days. "It's been a long time since I've heard someone talk like that," she confessed. "I can't even remember the last time." He took a deep breath, looking at her as if he were discovering something new right there in front of him. "You deserve to hear it more," she said simply and sincerely. She lifted her face, her eyes fixed on his. There were no tears this time, no guilt, no weight, only light. They were silent for a few seconds. Not a sad silence or empty, but a beautiful silence. The kind that connects two people without needing to say anything else. Carlos realized he was staring at her too much and looked away, laughing at himself. "If I had known your empanadas were like this, I would have come sooner," Giulietta joked, making a funny face. "Oh, so that's what was missing? A miraculous empanada?" "Maybe," he said, laughing. "Maybe that was it." She moved a little closer, slowly, as if testing the space between them. "Chan, doctor, can you tell me?" Carlos corrected her without losing his smile. "Carlos," she repeated, as if she liked how it sounded. "Thank you." He frowned. "Why?" "For this," she said, pointing to the air between them. "This moment, this breath. I haven't smiled like this since before my dad got sick. I thought I didn't even know how anymore." Carlos felt his heart beat a little faster, not in that painful way of the previous days, but in another way, a way that warmed his stomach. "I haven't smiled like that in a long time either," he confessed. They stood there facing each other with a plate of empanadas between them, like two people who had been hurt by life, but who, without realizing it, were slowly mending themselves. For the first time since the day they met in the middle of the night, there was no sadness between them, no guilt, no pain, only a smile and another smile and a simple warmth, discreet but true, a beginning, a small but living seed. They looked at each other, and in that gaze for the first time, there was no shadow of mourning between them. There was space, there was air, there was a future. Months passed, months of mornings with the smell of fresh dough. Months of long conversations in the small kitchen. Months of quick visits that always turned into hours. Months of shy laughter and glances that lasted a little longer than they should. Of silences that no longer hurt. They already had their way of being together. Nothing exaggerated, nothing said, but so natural that it seemed as if the world had always been that way. Carlos already knocked on the door without getting nervous. Giulietta already opened it without combing her hair. The two already knew each other in the details. The way he bit his lip when he got excited. The way she tangled her necklace around her finger when she got nervous. And together they learned to breathe again on one of those Sunday afternoons with soft sunshine, a gentle breeze, and the smell of the city at rest. Carlos stopped by her house to take her to a simple little square in the neighborhood. They sat on an old but comfortable wooden bench under a huge tree. Children played, vendors shouted popcorn, and a lazy dog slept next to the sugarcane juice stand. Giulietta wore her hair down, laughing at some silly Carlos, without realizing it, looked at her with such affection that he didn't even know he was capable of feeling. A boy passed by selling keychains and charms. Giulietta laughed when she saw one in the shape of a heart. "Just like mine," she said, touching the old necklace she always wore, the one her father had given her. Carlos smiled. Yes, just like it. Without him realizing it, she called the vendor and bought 2 small charms. She paid with coins and put them in her bag. The next day, she called Carlos. "Can you come over later? I want to show you something." He went when she called him into the house. He noticed that she was more nervous than usual. It had been a while since he had seen that gleam in her eyes, that firm, determined gleam. "Sit down for a while," he asked her. He sat down at the table where they had had so many conversations. Giulietta took a deep breath, reached into her bag, and took out a small package. It was a simple piece of paper, carefully folded. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but made with love. "It's for you," she said, pushing the package toward him. Carlos frowned, not understanding. For me? Please open it carefully. He let go of the corners of the paper. What was inside took his breath away for a few seconds. It was a new charm, a metal heart just like the one she had from her father. Simple, inexpensive, but full of meaning. He opened the charm, with carefully. Inside was a photo of the two of them. Julieta was sitting on a park bench, laughing spontaneously. Carlos was next to her, looking at the camera with a shy but beautiful smile. The two of them were together, side by side, without pain or mourning between them, only light. His hand trembled a little. When Julieta saw this, she spoke in the softest voice he had ever heard from her. I took that photo on the day at the park. Do you remember when I asked? Carlos looked up slowly, looking at her as if he were seeing something much bigger than the object in his hand. She kept swallowing. My dad always said he was a millionaire because of me. I didn't understand at the time. I thought it was a joke from my tired dad. He smiled with shining eyes. But now I understand. He had someone. He had love, and that makes you rich, even if you don't have a penny in his pocket. She took a deep breath with courage. He was a millionaire, doctor. He had me. She took a step toward him and touched the pendant with her finger. And now I think I'm rich too. Carlos's heart almost stopped. He swallowed. His voice stuck in his throat. He felt so much that it hurt, and at the same time, it healed him. Julieta said in a low voice, but full of truth, I take a deep breath. I was poor until a few months ago. Poor in everything. Family, affection, hugs. He looked at the charm and then into her eyes. And now I am the richest man in the world. She smiled in a way he would never forget. Because you know what love is, she asked softly. Carlos nodded, his eyes filled with tears. Because for the first time in my life, I know I am no longer alone. Julieta gently pressed her forehead against his. The two of them stayed there close together, breathing the same air, the same moment, the same miracle. And in that cheap little metal necklace beat a secret that no money in the world could buy. The love that was born of mourning, and taught two previously empty hearts how much 2 years were worth. 2 years that passed like when you light a candle, and, without realizing it, it's already halfway down. 2 years full of mending, healing, scares, laughter. 2 years of two lives that were once empty, merging into one another. The poor village where Julieta lived no longer looked so colorless. Their house now had flowers in the window and smelled of warm bread almost every day. Carlos came home from the hospital tired, but never alone. And Julieta, who used to sleep hugging her pillow, now slept with her hand intertwined with his. The mourning had become something different. It didn't disappear, but it had taken root. It had become the ground where they walked together. And now they were there at the altar, a simple church, creaking pews, children running, the wind coming in through the side door and moving her veil, cheap but fresh flowers, and a bunch of people from the neighborhood who weren't even invited properly, but came anyway, because it was too beautiful to ignore. Carlos stood in front of her, breathing fast, and his heart beating so hard you could hear it. She was beautiful, simple, without exaggeration, without luxury, but beautiful in a way that hurt because it was so real. When the priest asked for the vows, Carlos took a deep breath. His hands were shaking a little, not from fear, but from pure emotion. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out what he had carried with him every day since the first month by her side. Ernesto's necklace, the same necklace they had found on the cold chest of that forgotten man. The same necklace that changed everything. The same necklace that turned his life upside down. Carlos held the pendant between his fingertips, the chain moving, shining in the light of the church. Julieta put her hand to her mouth. She hadn't expected it, and her eyes were already filled with tears. Carlos looked at her, and for the first time, his voice came out firm, warm, full of something that came from deep within. Everyone thought that Ernesto had started with a broken voice, that he was just another poor soul. The whole church fell silent, but he had the most important thing. He had love. Carlos continued to look at the necklace as if it held a piece of his own destiny. He had Julieta, and that made him the richest man I have ever known. Julieta was already crying, softly, beautifully, full of emotion. Carlos continued, God put him in my path. Even after he was gone, he took a deep breath, and without my imagining it, he gave me a legacy. He lifted the necklace, and Ernesto's greatest treasure. Carlos's eyes met hers, and there, in that silence, you could feel the weight of the pain that became healing, the absence that became presence, the emptiness that became life. I will honor that man forever, he said in a firm but trembling voice, because he showed me what true love is, and I promise before God that I will love this woman every day of my life. Julieta covered her face with her hands, crying softly. The entire audience fell silent. Some people cried openly. Even the father looked down for a second. Carlos stepped forward, took her hands gently and said, I entered the morgue thinking that there would be only another life that had ended, and I left there with my life beginning. He smiled through his tears. Thank you for choosing me, and thank you, Ernesto, for giving me your daughter. Julieta tried to speak, but no sound came out. She could only nod her head as hot tears fell steadily but softly. The father moved, swallowed hard. You may exchange rings, he said, almost in a whisper. And there, in that simple moment, without luxury, without a famous audience, with nothing but love, the true millionaire secret finally appeared. It wasn't the necklace, it wasn't the photo, it wasn't the search, nor the money that never existed. It was the love that is born when two pains meet and decide to heal each other. The other, when Carlos placed the ring on Julieta's hand, he whispered only to her, Now I'm not alone anymore. She smiled with her face wet. Neither am I, Carlos. Neither am I. And when they kissed, it wasn't just the kiss of a couple, it was the kiss of 3 lives. His, hers, and old Ernesto's, who, although he wasn't there, was in everything because it was he who left the path. It was he who left the love. It was he who left the miracle. And so poor Ernesto left behind the greatest fortune a man can give.